All right, this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for the good programming, and I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, thanks for being here. It is Thursday, July 9th, and let's hope we can get to the weekend before we have World War III. What do you say? Apparently, the ceasefire is over. There is no more ceasefire between the United States and Iran. That is what Donald Trump is saying at this moment. Iran attacked Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain. And we apparently are going to will be attacking Iran. I think it's over, President Trump said, according to the Wall Street Journal. You're not sure? Wouldn't you be the one to know? You know, I think Donald Trump has been so desperate to put Iran in the rearview mirror that, you know, he really, really, really did not want to say that this ceasefire was over. He really did not want to do that. But when we're attacking them and they're attacking us, a little bit tricky to say there's still a ceasefire. According to the Wall Street Journal, in the Memorandum of Understanding, paragraph 5 is causing a lot of trouble. That has to do with the Strait of Hormuz, not surprisingly. But our allies don't like the way it was worded. It says Iran is supposed to restore shipping and then work with Oman, the other country on the other side of the strait, to determine how the strait will be administered in the future. Okay. What does that mean? Well, I don't think you would be going out on a limb to say that Iran is going to do everything in its power to charge a toll. I've heard that they might want as much as $1 million a ship going through the strait. Would companies pay that? I'm sure they would. And then that would be tacked on to the cost of the oil the tankers are carrying. And then that would be tacked on to the people who are refining that oil into gas. And then that would be tacked on, do you see where I'm going with this? To the price you pay at the pump. So oil prices are going to go up, and that means gas prices are going up. I had a texter yesterday who said that the station that they go to increased the price of a gallon of gas 36 cents in 24 hours. That's a lot. That is a lot. But I don't know if Donald Trump is really going to be talking about Iran much today because, you know, he has he's put up scaffolding in a new spot at the White House. Yep. I told you, somebody said on cable news that Trump would have been much happier as a first lady than as a president because all he wants to do is decorate and restore and rehab and rebuild, which is traditionally kind of what first ladies are tasked with doing. But yeah, there's scaffolding up now, and we are being told that the columns in front of the White House need some work. I wonder when the scaffolding comes down if there will even be columns. Maybe there'll be solid gold columns. And engraved in the solid gold columns, it will say Trump. Do you think that's outlandish? We'll see, won't we? We will see just how outlandish that ends up being, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, I wanted to remind you that this is Thursday, So for the first hour of the show, the phone lines and the text lines are wide open. 773 763 9278. 773 763 9278. Got that? Got that? Okay. Henry's in the studio today, and he will be taking your calls. Before we go on to talk about more of the national news and Graham Plattner and all that, a hat tip to Bob Stroud. He is retiring. Bob Stroud has been on the radio since I first arrived in Chicago. I've got to do some math here. Hang on for a quick minute. Okay, I came to Chicago 45 years ago. Bob Stroud was on the radio. He's never stopped being on the radio. He's switched stations, but he has been a continual presence. He has most recently been at the Drive. You know, he syndicated his Rock and Roll Roots show. That has come to a conclusion. Bob Stroud has been a legend in Chicago. You know, if you've lived in Chicago for any length of time, Bob has been on the radio. He's due for a little R&R, and I wish him nothing but the best. He is a terrific guy. He is, you want to hope that the people that you hear about or that you see are really nice, and you know that you have a real feel for the fact that they're not just nice when they're on the air. Bob Stroud is a great guy. He's nice, he's kind, he's down to earth. He will be missed. Okay. We still have no word on Mitch McConnell, so there's that. By the way, if you are on social media, there are so many Mitch McConnell jokes, so many people claiming, like Scott Jennings did, that they've talked to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes. Even Thomas Massey, and I think when he first posted this, people thought he was talking something that had happened, but I think even Thomas Massey, the congressman from Kentucky, who was shoved aside, primaried, and got rid of by Trump, I think Thomas Massey was trolling Mitch McConnell. Thomas Massey yesterday posted, well, you know, I talked to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes, and he's really sorry about this, and he's sorry this happened, and he's really, really sorry that I lost my primary. When I first read it, I thought maybe it was real. I no longer think that. And I talked to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes. Humor is everywhere, is absolutely everywhere. If that offends you, if you don't think he is one of the worst folks ever be to elected office in our lifetime, then stay away from it. You know, if you don't want anybody to speak ill of the probably dead, don't look that stuff up. But for the rest of us, it's pretty interesting. He's still in the hospital. We still really haven't gotten any kind of word on his condition. If he is on life support, well, you know, his wife's out of the country, and seems like she would be the one. If there was anybody to say take him off life support, it would be her. She's in China. 3 days after he went into the hospital, she went to China. She, as near as I can tell, hasn't come home yet. So there's nobody hounding her. Nobody trying to ask her what she's going to do. Nobody asking her for updates on her husband. Pretty convenient, huh? Yeah, I thought so too. We'll see what happens. Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, sent a letter to McConnell's staff saying, look, you owe it to the people of Kentucky to let us know what's going on. If he dies or otherwise leaves office permanently, there will be a special election called. And who knows? A lot of people are speculating that Thomas Massie would throw his hat in the ring for that Republican Senate seat from Kentucky. But if they can keep his condition quiet until August 3rd, then it's the rules are that that's considered close enough to November that the seat would simply not be filled. Because it seems that the Republicans are really, really leery of this idea of a special election. And wouldn't it be wonderful if Thomas Massie ran and won? Even if he didn't win, the belief is that he would probably act as a spoiler and take votes away from any other Republican in the race so that quite possibly a Democrat could win. You know, Thomas Massie getting into that race is a win-win. Either somebody who's willing to stand up to Trump gets a Senate seat, or a Democrat gets a Senate seat. I have no problem with either of those scenarios. And, of course, the big news of the day, which you may wonder why I'm just now getting around to, because it's been everywhere. Graham Plattner, the Democratic nominee to run for Senate in Maine, has officially announced that he is going to step aside. But, you know, Monday is the last day for him to file his official paperwork and allow another candidate to get on the ballot. Even though this is Thursday, he's apparently not going to, he said he's not going to file that paperwork till Monday. At least that's what X is reporting. And Graham Plattner posted a video about the fact that he's stepping aside. It runs 11 minutes. Obviously, I can't play the whole thing, but I'm going to play a little bit for you. The interesting thing is that in the entire 11 minutes, he never really says that anything he has said or done is part of the reason for his downfall. He seems to want to frame his exit in larger terms that, you know, Democrats don't want progressives or something along those lines, which is, I don't know, a little bit problematic. This is the first 3 minutes of Graham Plattner's video withdrawing from the race. Listen to this.
Hey, everyone. It's Graham Plattner here. I think as many of you know, over the past couple days, I have faced some very serious allegations, and I just want to make it clear. This is all false. The things that have been claimed did not happen. It's not real. It has placed an immense amount of weight on me as I think about what needs to happen now. Amy and I are regular people. We were not looking for this experience. We were not looking to get into politics. We had no desire to run for office. I just want you to think about like what you would do as a regular person in a position where a much larger world, large forces were working against you personally to accuse you of the worst thing that a person could do, and it was not remotely true. I learned about this through press inquiries, with no time to truly respond, no time for investigations before a corporate media system And the political establishment got to act as judge, jury, and executioner. Accusations are supposed to be the beginning of things, not the end. I think it's really important to understand why this is happening in the timeline, why this is happening right now. Much like October, when the first attack started, much like the news that was created the week before the primary, there is a reason that this is happening now. I only have until July 13th until I am officially the nominee. This was the last week to try to get me off of the ballot. And that's why this is occurring. It's not the false allegations, though, that have brought us to where we are. It's the fact that they are being used by the political establishment to put structural pressure on us. We live in a political system that is not built for normal people. It is a system that is built structurally to make sure that movements like ours cannot flourish. That if they begin to succeed, they can be crushed.
That was the first 3 minutes of an 11-minute video posted by Graham Plattner talking about his departure from the Senate race in Maine. He has faced allegations before. You know, he was found to be wearing a tattoo that had Nazi connections. He claimed that he was in the military. They were all drunk one night. They all got tattoos, and he didn't know what it meant. He has been facing a number. The accusation of rape is the most recent charge against him. Another woman accused of him of sexual assault. And he has answered all of the accusations brought up against him by saying, look, when he got out of the military, he said he had a drinking problem. He had PTSD. He said that he was a different person now and that he hoped people would judge him by who he is now and not who he was then. But a woman accused him of sexually inappropriate behavior. And then another woman said that she felt she had to come forward and say that he had forced himself on her one night when he entered her home. She smelled alcohol on his breath. She tried to say no, but he wasn't hearing it. He's absolutely right. There isn't time to investigate these accusations, but this is sort of, I think, the straw that broke the camel's back. Because they keep coming. He did this, he said this, he did this, he said this. And it's reached the point, I think, where whether or not he could defeat Susan Collins has become a question. And there have been so far as of today, at least as far as I can tell, that there are 5 Democrats so far who have said that they will replace him or would like to replace him. Let's see. There were 2 former gubernatorial candidates, Troy Jackson and Nirav Shah, who've said that they're willing to take over the race. Jordan Wood, who had originally said he wanted to be in this race but dropped out to go for Congress instead. Maine Beer Company owner Dan Kleben and David Costello. Assuming Plattner gets his paperwork in before the deadline, there will be a decision made by the main Democratic Party. They're going to have a convention. According to Yahoo News, there will be about 600 people there. 500 of those will be delegates. There will be a 100-person state committee there. And they will be deciding among the candidates who are ready to replace Graham Plattner, who will be the nominee. It is roughly, I think, 4 weeks or so that they have, but that's how the process is going to unfold. They were discussing Graham Plattner's exit from this race on CNN this morning, and one of the things that people pointed out is that in the entire 11-minute video, he never really acknowledges that anything he might have said or done is part of the reason why he is now stepping aside. As you just heard in the beginning, he feels that this isn't just an attack on him, it's an attack on approaching this as a sort of a man of the people, progressive, though he comes from a very wealthy family. So we'll see. We'll see. Okay, let's, I want to share a couple of texts with you before we go to the break. 773-763-9278. We'll be getting to your calls right after the break. Bob from Elgin texted in that Kentucky Governor Beshear should replace McConnell and force proof of life. Well, unlike most states where if a senator steps aside, the governor, whoever that may be, replaces them, Kentucky is different. If McConnell is found to be dead or otherwise incapable of continuing, there will be a special election. Andy Beshear does not get to just pick and choose the person who will fill out the rest of Mitch's term. There will be a special election. And I hope that happens. I would love to see Thomas Massey run in a special election. I think that would be awesome. I mean, maybe he wouldn't be chosen by the people of Kentucky. Maybe he would. So that's what we're waiting for. And there's a lot of talk that Republicans know Mitch McConnell will never be coming back to the Senate, but they're trying to keep his condition under wraps till August 3rd. If we get to August 3rd, there will be no special election to fill the seat, and the seat will simply stay open until the November election. So Republicans are clearly nervous about that seat, which is interesting because Kentucky's pretty red. Yeah, they have got a Democratic governor, but it's a pretty red state. But they seem to be very, very concerned that if there were a special election, they just might lose it. Somebody else texted in, I hope the CNN conservative pundit that claimed to have talked with Mitch lied. And if he lied, will he be fired? No, he will not be fired. No. As long as Donald Trump is in office, Scott Jennings is probably safe from being fired by CNN. Because remember, CNN is quite possibly going to be taken over by David Ellison. David Ellison is a big supporter of Donald Trump. Scott Jennings is Donald Trump's MAGA mouthpiece on CNN. He is probably untouchable, whether or not he is lying. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are reading your texts. We are taking your calls. This text came in about Mitch McConnell. Somebody will get in that hospital room and share the good news before August 3rd. Withdrawal of life support may be authorized telephonically. Being in China is no excuse. That's where Mitch's wife is. Maybe the wife was disgusted by what the GOP wanted and hightailed it off to China to get out of the fray. interesting. He is at George Washington Hospital. And like Walter Reed, George Washington is used to treating those in elected office. So more so, first of all, hospitals are supposed to keep your information private, but hospitals are filled with people, some more reliable than others. However, if you are used to having high-profile elected officials as your patients, the privacy and security is really ramped up. So I do not believe that we should expect to hear some sort of TMZ report that somebody in the hospital is saying this or the other thing about Mitch McConnell. It shouldn't happen at any hospital, but people are people. But a hospital that is used to dealing with the privacy of VIPs, things are a little more stringent there. So I don't know that we will hear anything. And I've said this before, and I'm not trying to be gross. I have a medical background. I've worked in a hospital. I worked in medical ICU. I've worked in a pulmonary ICU. When you are older, you know, when you're older, you don't recover the same way. If you get sick, it takes longer to recover. Illnesses that maybe a younger person would bounce back from, you don't. If indeed Mitch McConnell is on life support, he's a medically challenged 84-year-old. Even if you're on life support, there are other ways other than not breathing or your heart not beating. There are other ways that you can die. Your liver can quit. Your kidneys can quit. And the older you are, the more likely these things are to happen. If indeed he is on life support, my guess is that there's simply no way he would survive until August 3rd. That's 3 weeks away. And he's already been in the hospital since June 14th. Seems unlikely to me. He's going to get septic. He's going to get a blood infection, something. If, and I have no knowledge one way or the other, if he is on life support, it is unlikely that he will bounce back from that. Let us go to the phone lines. Carl is on the line from Kankakee. Hello, Carl. How are you?
Hey, Joan. Let's see. Where are we? I'm walking in here to make some coffee. Okay.
Make one for me.
Okay. Can do. Will do. Number one, top of the list. Little song here. Truth has been shown to be lies, while all the joy within us dies. Jefferson Airplane, back in the day. Number one. That's lesson one. Number two, does Randy Manor live in Maine?
Sadly, no. But you know who does? Heather Cox Richardson, the historian who is the number one followed person on Substack. She actually posted a video. She said, look, people are asking me if I'm going to run for Senate. The answer is no. She says, that is not my skill set. What I'm doing here right now is my skill set. So, no, I will not be running for Senate. So, anybody with any kind of a profile who lives in Maine is getting these questions.
By the way, 20222-43121. That is?
Yeah, what? Oh, how to reach your elected representatives?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. That's our orders from the general. He was serious the other day. Call it the most critical time in our American history.
Yeah.
The general gave us orders 20222-43121. I've learned it. Number three.
That Randy Manor is always telling people that your voice means more than you think. And I know this from having talked to aides who work with congresspeople or senators. They record. One of the first things, though, if you get a real person, and you can leave a voicemail, but if you get a real person, they'll ask you your zip code because they want to make sure you're a constituent. But even if you're not a constituent, you can voice your opinion. But if you are a constituent, they keep track of all those calls. How many people support this idea? How many people want my elected official to do this or say this? It really matters a lot. And they know that for every person who calls, there are probably at least 10 or a dozen people who feel the same way who are not calling.
Speaking to Mitch McConnell does not mean he's speaking back.
You know, I thought of the same thing. If Scott Jennings called Mitch McConnell's number and did a monologue on all those things, he could say, he doesn't say Mitch responded or Mitch thought this or Mitch is going to do this. And, on CNN, Casey Hunt, Scott Jennings was on with her and gave her this whole 20-minute talk to McConnell thing. And she said, well, okay, if you've got his number and you've talked to him, call him right now. Call him right now. And he sort of stepped away from that question. He did not call Mitch McConnell, and he sort of he hedged. Let's just say he hedged. Hey.
I've got an observation. Last week I said Trump's using communist because he's worried about their money being taken away. Over the weekend, I was reading this beautiful coffee table book on the jewels of the czars, and it was a history of each of the ones down the line, and all. And the last chapter doesn't end well for the Romanovs when the communists take over.
No,
and I think Putin might have put that in his head to mess with him or something.
Well, as I've said before, as we get closer to the midterms, with the election of a handful of Democratic socialists, Trump is going to try to bang the drum and paint everybody as communists. And for people who don't really want to take the time to educate themselves, maybe they'll just go along with what Trump says. But a Democratic socialist isn't even the same thing as a socialist, let alone a communist. And by the way, you want to talk about socialism? The VA, how we take care of our vets, kids, that's socialism. That is the government providing them with a service, with health care. If you want to know what socialism is, look at the VA and the fact that veterans get medical treatment basically for free. They get it basically for free. They are taken care of by the government. That, folks, is socialism.
And it's done at only a 10% overhead versus a 30% overhead for the insurance-led health care.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Much more efficiently operated. Boom.
Yes,
it is. Last thing, back with a song parody or Who'll Stop the Rain, REIGN.
Mm-hmm.
Carry on, Joan. Thank you. A cup of coffee's almost ready to be poured.
Thanks. I'll take a little bit of cream, no sugar.
Okie dokie. You're sweet
Thanks,
enough.
Carl.
We all know that.
Thanks, Carl. I was responding to a text a few minutes ago, somebody saying that sooner or later somebody's going to spill the beans at the hospital. And I said, it's not supposed to happen. There is a privacy in laws in place, but people are people, and sometimes it does happen. But in a hospital that's used to dealing with VIPs and keeping their information private, there are more stringent rules in place, and people have to prove themselves capable of that kind of containment of somebody's privacy to take care of some of those patients. Somebody on a text line, I don't have your name, but they disagree with me. Somebody will get into that hospital room. FYI, I have worked for years in hospital leadership across the country at the, quote, best hospitals. The McConnell info will be shared. Well, there's 3 weeks till August 3rd. There's plenty of time for somebody to tell us something. Let's hope it happens. Let's go to Dave, who's on the line from Hoffman Estates. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Joan.
How are you?
I'm hanging in there. with that the McConnell with the speaking and all that. How do we know it wasn't the AI?
That's interesting.
You got them dead musicians, not that they do hologram and AI, and you wouldn't even know. Just a thought there, that I would think that they would keep him artificially alive till 12:01 a.m. on August 4th, and then he's declared dead, therefore he can't run it. So,
well, that's what a lot of people are guessing because there has been no information. But that's what I'm saying. If he's as old as he is and as sick as he is and in the horrible condition that he is alleged to be in, I don't think his body's going to last. I really don't.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised his brain dead when they called in for the paramedics and that he was, passed out, laid out?
Unconscious, and they started CPR. And there's no word on whether or not the CPR was able to restart his heart. So that's what we know.
How long was not getting oxygen to the brain even?
Well, there you go. They said he was unconscious when they arrived. Yeah. I don't know if his wife, who I believe was home then, I don't know if she started CPR before they got there. That can make a difference. But all we know is what's on the call. And frankly, they don't mention Mitch McConnell by name on that call, but they give Mitch McConnell's address, and they took this person to the hospital the same day Mitch McConnell went into the hospital. So it seems pretty likely that that's who they were talking about.
Yeah, a couple of the history things. What's going on with the hospital. Remember that time under George W. Bush's when John Ashcroft was in the hospital?
No, I don't remember that.
That was the time when he was recovering in ICU, and that White House counsel Alberto Gonzalez and Andrew Card visited his bedside to pressure him into reauthorizing the program, as reported, for the domestic spying and stuff. And apparently, if it wouldn't have been acting Attorney General Comey and FBI Director Mueller, they rushed there to support Ashcroft, who refused to sign that document.
Wow.
Yeah, that was under George W., in 2004. But then today's date, in 2018, Donald Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh to fill the seat left vacant by retirement of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, a fellow rapist and perjurer.
Well, it's interesting. Somebody asked Trump about Graham Plattner, and Trump, who himself has had a lot of problems in this area, said, well, you just have to, you either believe, it's whether or not you believe the woman. And that's because he was asked, do you think Graham Plattner is a rapist? And he said, well, it depends on whether or not you believe the woman. And that's all he said. So.
My thoughts, if they tried to go after him again for prison time, then I guess they better get a hold of Kavanaugh and Clarence Thomas.
Yeah.
And because apparently it'd be like murder or something. There ain't no statute of limitations. So, and then like with that cutter and that when the Iranians have been sending shells over to our bases over there and the other ones. Well, who do you think? Trump's going to definitely protect them. Who gave him that 747?
Yeah. And what's interesting? It was reported, even though he flew to NATO on his new fabulous jet, he didn't use it to fly home. And he claimed that he was sending it to a couple of military bases in Europe because he wanted the military people to see how incredibly wonderful it was. Well, the story being released is that he had to switch to an older Air Force One because the Qatari jet didn't have as many defensive capabilities as the previous planes. And, the Ayatollah has called for Trump's murder. And the belief was that they were terrified that somebody was going to try to shoot missiles at the plane and that the Qatari plane wouldn't have the sufficient defenses to prevent the plane from being blown up.
Well, earlier in that Iran thing, who was it that shot down one or two of our jets?
Yeah.
Remember?
Yep.
No, anyway, and the Iranians already kind of been egging on Trump or daring him to do that Cargill and saying that if you do, it's going to be a slaughter. He said, that they're waiting on him, they're ready,
Yeah.
and that.
And Dave, I got to get to a break, but I thank you so much for the call. We are going to be right back with more calls and more texts right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are reading your texts and taking your calls as we do the first hour of the show, Monday through Thursday. Remember, tomorrow is Friday, and we will have the text lines and phone lines open for at least the first half of the show, up until 3:30. Let's go to Green Bay, where Cam is on the line. Hey, Cam, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm good. Thanks for the call today.
I wanted to bring up that when you call a lot of the, especially the MAGA-centric representatives, and you're not one of their constituents, they'll snip that out right away nowadays, and they will just tell you they're not going to write down any feedback or anything. They're just going to drop the call and recommend that you talk to whoever is your representative. And I've noticed the opposite with any of the left-leaning ones. They go, okay, well, we can take a message if you want, but we do recommend that you talk to your own representative. And then second, I wanted to bring up a tool that I had created. Does not exist anywhere else in the world as far as I know. But it's on, and I'm not doing this for like money or anything or shouting out my own business or anything. I promise. It's civicresultmaps.org, and what this website does is takes all of the voting data from 2024, 2020, 2016, and 2012 that it can find, because every state publishes it differently, and then it pulls it through scientific, peer-reviewed, known methods of identifying possible symptoms of election tampering. And it's some of the same methods that were used in documentation that you could view on USAID's website before they were taken down. But, yeah, it's important that we keep track of this, because it very much so looks like there's issues across the country at the moment. 2024 alone has over 3,800 audit flag findings that show that there's symptoms in counties across the country. And I just really think that people need to drop the idea that elections are safe, fair, and free, because the data does not support that.
That couldn't be more wrong, Cam. I'm sorry to interrupt you, and appreciate the work you put into your website, but there are all of the election officials, state by state, go through the data and the procedures very, very carefully. And the amount of election fraud is almost non-existent. As a matter of fact, sometimes, who was it? Ken Paxton was saying that there were people voting illegally in Texas, and a look into it found that there was only one person who was voting illegally in Texas, and that was Ken Paxton, who was voting out of an address he doesn't even live at anymore. So I'm sorry, Cam, but I think that you are completely wrong with that.
That's election fraud that they're claiming, which is not the case. Election tampering is a completely separate issue, and I actually agree with you.
It's a cousin, and it has been proven time and time and time again. When there is a deep dive done, when all the ballots are looked at, when all the procedures are looked at, when all the camera angles are looked at, and it just isn't happening. That's a conspiracy theory. And Cam, I'm going to move on. Thank you for the call. Let's go to our good friend Ron, who is on the line from Chicago. Hello, Ron.
Hello. We don't have to worry about World War III. The Pentagon's out of money.
Oh, well, yeah, that's good. But you know what? We still have the nukes, you know? I mean, they don't have... How much money would it cost to push a button? I don't know.
I have to hire a temporary agency, maybe.
Where did you read that the Pentagon was out of money?
I heard it today on Tom Hartman.
Really?
Yeah. They have to, and then until October 1st, they have to go to Congress and beg for more money now.
Good grief. Well, they have been spending money hand over fist. I mean, when you're conducting a war in Iran that is costing $1 billion a day, I imagine that checkbook runs dry pretty quickly.
Yeah, they spent $1 trillion already this year.
And when you use a $5 million missile to take out a $60,000 drone, you know, that kind of that doesn't do the balance sheet any favors.
Yeah, and also I heard today that it's going to cost another $500 million to retrofit the new Air Force One for security. So
yeah, well, they said when he took possession of the Qatari jet that it would cost $1 billion to bring it up to speed, and apparently. Even though he's flying it around, it wasn't completely up to speed because they had to take it away.
And yesterday Trump said that the Iran is cuckoo. Didn't we just give Iran $300 million? Hello.
Well, yeah, I don't know if that money actually got transferred, but that's what we were going to. We were going to give them. I think it was more than that. I think it was in the billions, as in the bees. But wow. Yeah, who knows? Who knows what's been transferred? We'll have to wait until somebody does a deep dive or some politician comes clean. Ron, thank you for the call. I'm going to try to get one more caller in before we go for news, and that is our good friend Paul, who is on the line from Seattle. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Joan. I watch a lot of Columbo, so I'm thinking, ma'am, this doesn't add up. Just one more thing, ma'am, this doesn't add up. I was just very confusing here. About Mitch McConnell, and being a medical reporter, you'll resonate, and you'll know all this stuff. But the one thing is, I don't know that anybody who says that they talked to him mentioned what they talked about for 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, he doesn't say Mitch said this or Mitch said that, does he?
Right. No, and the reason is, and I know this, first of all, I was raised by a clinical nurse practitioner. My mom was a nurse practitioner for 67 years. But she was in the hospital, Mom was, in 2018. She was in the hospital for 21 days with, she had an operation on her bowel, a routine thing that happened from a hernia that she had. And then there was a complication, and then another, and then that's what led to 21 days. 21 days, she got weaker and weaker and weaker. And no, there were no 20-minute conversations. The conversations were 3 to 5 minutes. And all she could really talk about was, when you see your mother slipping away, she's fighting for her life because all she could say was, I've got to get out of here. You don't talk about anything in particular except that.
There's
nothing
absolutely
about,
absurd.
well, I can't wait to get back on the White House. And the other thing is that for every week that an 80-year-old, my mom was 88 at the time, is in the hospital, that's a week of inpatient rehab, and a month for every week in the hospital, a month of at-home rehab. So if he ever gets out of here, he's not returning. He's not returning to work at this point for at least 5 months. So I don't believe it that he didn't mention anything. But the thing is that if he's still in the hospital, and this is what people don't understand, the hospital staff, they want to get him out of there as quickly as possible because, as you mentioned, only worse things can set in. So if there's any way to release him, and the reason they didn't release my mom was because he had this low-level, low-grade fever that was like not, 1 degree. She was like at 99.6, and they thought she's got an infection, and they couldn't track it down. But they find out it was an inflammation fever from being poked in the arm too many times with needles. He had phlebitis. But when they figured that out, then they finally released it. They got to get him into rehab so that he can stop getting weaker. Because if you're just laying in bed, I don't care pretty much how old you are. If you're 80-some years old and you're laying in bed for 25 days, there's just no way you're going to bounce. I don't care what you're in there for. But a cardiac arrest? This guy, if they don't get him, people just, the staff wants to get him out. The doctors they're at a race with time to get him into rehab to strengthen again. This isn't like, oh, well, we're going to keep him a little while longer. You only stay in the hospital if there's something still wrong. That means there are more and more complications. If he's still alive and he's still in the hospital, that means he's not getting better. Not getting better, getting worse. You've seen that.
Or just holding his own.
Yeah. Well, as a friend of mine said one time when he was buying a house and the person who was selling the house got sick and went in the hospital, and so the sale was pending, and so then he finally called me and said, "Well," I said, "What's with the seller?" And he said, "Well, his condition is stable but downgraded from critical." I said, "Downgraded stable but downgraded from critical, huh?" Yeah. The sale isn't going to happen.
And, I don't even know that we've gotten, is he critical? Is he critical but stable? Is he stable? We haven't gotten any word on Mitch McConnell. But I do believe that sooner or later we are going to hear. And honestly, I believe we will hear before August 3rd when it becomes different electorally. Paul, I got to go to the news. Thank you so much for the call. We are going to take a break. We will be back after the news with Eric Zorn.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It has been a while since we have talked about the Picayune Sentinel, the newsletter created by Eric Zorn, former Chicago Tribune columnist. We are remedying that today. Eric is with us to talk about today's edition. Eric, how are you?
I'm good. Joan, how are you? It's been a while.
It has been a while because you keep going on vacation.
Yeah, I've been traveling a lot. Got family business back in Michigan, and then we had weddings and fiddle festivals and all kinds of stuff like that. So,
what does one do at a fiddle festival?
One plays fiddle tunes 18 hours a day.
Wow. Oh, wow. If that's what you love, then I'm glad for you to be at fiddle festivals.
What you say, it's funny you say it because it's kind of what I wrote today a little bit about soccer, which is, it's like, fiddle tunes are not for everybody. I certainly understand that. And I respect that. And in fact, if they were for everybody, I would never get into festivals. So so that's all right with me. And same with soccer. Soccer's not for me, but it doesn't bother me that so many people are into soccer. So that seems cool to me.
Do you think hosting the World Cup is going to change the popularity of soccer in this country?
Marginally, it might. I don't. Every time. I mean, when was it? It was 94, 96. It was some 30 years ago that we hosted it. The Chicago was one of the host cities, and I think it gave soccer a little bit of a boost. People have been saying since I was a kid, that so many people play soccer when they're young that the fan base is going to be there for professional soccer, international soccer, and that there has been some traction to that, but not nearly as much as people have predicted. That it's, to my mind, the All-American games are baseball and football because there's so much time in between plays. It gives us time to criticize and speculate and analyze. And soccer is a really fast-moving game, and so there's not a lot of time to think about what's going to happen next. You just kind of watch it. People are telling me that but soccer is constant motion, and that's what makes it so interesting. And I think that Americans don't really love constant motion. They like to blather on and on about games as they're in progress.
I agree with you. I had never been to a Blackhawks game, so I went many years ago, and I found that it was so fast-paced that I was always looking in the wrong spot. I was looking where something had just happened, and by the time I turned over to where it was happening, then it had moved again. I couldn't keep up with it. I have another theory about soccer, though. You're right. A lot of kids play soccer, and I think that instills a dislike of soccer. My daughter was very athletic. I didn't mind going to basketball games, but I hated going to soccer games. It was the first part of the season. It's way too cold. For one day, it's temperate. And for the rest of the season, it's way too hot. They were miserable. I'm sorry, but that's just my take.
I remember that with my kids playing soccer too, standing on the sidelines. And of course, when they're young, they just cluster around the ball. There's not really any strategy or fine-tuned skills. They're just all in a little knot running around the field, kicking at the ball. And I mean, they have a good time and they get tired out and they nap. So that's a good thing. But, I mean, like I say, I don't like to engage that much in the soccer is boring, no soccer is thrilling conversation because, if people like soccer, that's great. I think it's fabulous and it's available on TV and they can watch it and they can talk about Manchester United and whatever other teams there are over in England and which ones they're rooting for. And that's fine with me. I'm one of the people who thinks that watching golf on TV is interesting.
Oh, my God, you're kidding me. You are kidding me.
Well, and a lot of people think, well, that, there's nothing more boring than watching rich guys walking for 5 minutes and then analyzing the shot and then hitting a ball with a stick and then walking after it again. But I find it very interesting. It's a very challenging game, and I get that people think it's boring. I totally understand that, and I don't care that they think it's boring. They don't have to watch it, and that's fine. And I guess it's like taste in music as well. It's like, you like your kind of music, I like my kind of music, and it's not gonna hurt anybody. You're not going to force you into watching soccer. You're not going to force you into listening to old time fiddle tunes.
Interesting about these FIFA games. Rahm Emanuel was asked why Chicago wasn't one of the cities, and he said that FIFA came to the city of Chicago and basically wanted the city of Chicago to pay for everything and take all the risk. They literally, and Rahm went off on this list. They wanted us to pay for this. Basically, FIFA wanted to pay for nothing. And he said, I didn't care. I thought it would be great if FIFA came, but he said we weren't going to take that kind of deal where we pay for everything and then they reap all the profits. I wonder if, like Boston or some of the other cities that hosted games, I wonder if they agreed to those kind of terms.
Well, the term that Emanuel cited when I heard him interviewed about this was that FIFA demanded the right to require Chicago to put a dome over Soldier Field if they so ordered. And they were telling him in negotiations, like, well, we probably won't ask for this. There's a very small chance that we will, but we have to put this in the contract. And Rahm said, if it's in the contract, no, I'm not going to take that risk for the taxpayers' money in Chicago that you're going to suddenly say you have to have a dome or you're in violation of this contract. And they wouldn't take it out, and he wouldn't leave it in, and so they came to loggerheads about that. And I guess that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, clearly you see how some of the American cities have been responding to having the World Cup in them. That they've been really enjoying it, and and all these international visitors. There's probably a lot of money that comes in, and probably. In the end of the day, it probably would have been a smart thing to do. The Tribune editorial board was carrying on about that we made a really bad decision. But I think Emanuel is just trying to be careful with the taxpayers' money, and maybe he made the wrong call. And they probably would not. They haven't asked other cities to put a dome up, but why they were intransigent on that, I don't know. But. I applaud Emanuel for being flinty with taxpayer money at that point.
Absolutely, Eric. I do need to take a break. One of the things that is in the current Picayune Sentinel is your appraisal of the mayor's race and who may or may not be in it. That's one of the things that I talk about all the time. And you have an interesting list that is a little longer than the list I have. I've been keeping a list too. Eric Zorn writes the Picayune Sentinel. He and I are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Eric Zorn publishes the Picayune Sentinel newsletter. And it comes out, well, if you're a subscriber, you get a Tuesday edition because we're special. But it comes out publicly every Thursday. And one of the things that he is writing about are the people who are in or may soon be in the race to become the next mayor of Chicago. I have been keeping a document on my desktop since early January. Actually, that's not true. Since October or September of last year, of 2025, whenever anybody says they're in or like Cam, you don't have on your list Cam Buckner, but Cam Buckner was quoted in Politico as saying, anybody who's ever wanted to be mayor of Chicago always wants to be mayor of Chicago. Never say never. That was in January. I'm sorry. As far as I'm concerned, he's in the race. But you do have a couple of people I don't have. Tony Brooks, anti-violence activist LaTanya Tony Brooks. And here's the one that I was like scratching my head. Danielle Carter Wallers, co-founder of the pro-Trump group Chicago Flips Red. Tell me about her. I know nothing about her or her apparent interest in being mayor.
Yeah, I don't think we have to take her all that seriously, frankly.
Well, I can't imagine she thinks she's got a prayer of winning.
She is among a small group of African American women who are Trump supporters, and they've showed up at city council meetings and made some noise about some stuff. And I think she threw her red hat into the ring just to get some attention for her group. And that's the way it goes. All you got to do to get a significant amount of attention these days is say, I'm running for mayor. What prompted me to write this was that Dr. Lisa Nee, a cardiologist who operates or who practices out in Elmhurst and lives, I guess, on the north side, announced that she was running for mayor. She has absolutely no political experience at all, and she considers that maybe a calling card. That she said, well, I don't have political experience, but I can get things done. And she is she seems like a very fine person. She was a whistleblower who called attention to some shady practices at the Heinz Veterans Hospital.
I think she also has an MBA because she was arguing that she has business experience. As well.
Yeah, she does. No. I don't. I mean, I'm really not trying to denigrate her at all. And in fact, that one of the points of my piece today was, in previous years, someone would announce they were running against Mayor Daley, for instance. Doc Walls, for instance, is the name that comes to mind. And you would, as a journalist, you'd roll your eyes, and he would have to come into the Tribune, and we'd have to listen to him say what he wanted to do. And everybody knew it's like absolutely no chance that you're going to beat Mayor Daley. And so these marginal candidates would just get attention, and you'd just be able to ignore them. Then came Lori Lightfoot. You remember when Lori Lightfoot declared for mayor in fairly early 2018, which was about a year before the election. Everyone was like, okay, she had just resigned as the president of the police board. A lawyer, good resume, seemed like a well-spoken, smart person, and I had heard her interviewed at various places and thought that she was impressive. But come on, she's going up against Rahm Emanuel. Who's she kidding? Why am I going to spend any time paying attention to Lori Lightfoot? Is that her name? I was like, and of course, and then she was polling at 2.9% in the polls.
Yep.
Up until February of 2019, when the election was, she was really mired down in the polls.
But a lot of people believe that getting the endorsement of the Sun-Times is what catapulted her essentially into the mayor's office. Remember that?
Totally, I remember that. In fact, I just had dinner with Tom McNamee the other day. If you remember Tom, he was the editor of the editorial board at the Sun-Times, and we were sort of reminiscing about the old days, and of course that came up. Because one of the things we were talking about was, does anything that we write, that we columnists or editorial writers write, make any damn difference at all? Right? It's like we're sitting here. Are we just out on the beach raging against the surf? I don't know. And Tom, we're talking about that, and it came up. I said, I think most people agree that the Sun-Times, I think it was a front page endorsement. It was certainly very prominent.
In very large type, as I recall.
Yeah, and I mean, it may be magnified in our memories, but in any case, I think it was extremely important. People gave a second look to her. and she came in first place. I mean, she was in like ninth place, I think, in the polls, really early on, and it was one of those comebacks that made you realize, like, you don't think that you've got a crystal ball. Yeah, in fact, here, as I reported this morning, on January 25th, which was about a month before the election, she was in ninth place out of 14 candidates with 2.9% support in the polls. I mean, so I don't know what Dr. Lisa Nee has or some of these other candidates we're talking about, but you can't count anybody out, especially in July, the year before the election.
Yeah.
And well, of course, and then came, so was that a fluke? Well, then in 2022, here comes Brandon Johnson, who's not very well known Cook County commissioner, and he announces his challenge to Lightfoot, and just 4 months before the election. In mid-December, he was at 3% in the polls, way behind Lightfoot and Paul Vallis and Chuy Garcia. He was behind Willie Wilson, and he only had single-digit support right up until just before the election, it looks like. And then he finishes second to Vallis in the first round with 22% of the vote. Vallis gets 33. And then in the final election, we get him beating Vallis by 4 percentage points, and he's the mayor. So, we can look at Dr. Lisa Nee or Tony Brooks or Danielle Carter Walters or any of these other people and say, like, they have no chance. But at this point, I don't know that we know. The race has got. I mean, I identified 16 names of people, and I did include Cam Buckner, but I was not. I didn't put him in my bullet list. I added him at the end with Willie Wilson and Alderman
Well, I was just going to
Conway.
say Willie Wilson isn't one of your bullet point people either.
Well, he hasn't said he's going to run, and I'm not sure that. Maybe he's got an appetite to run and lose again. I don't know. Alexi Janulius has not said he's going to run, and all signs point to him running. And of course, Brandon Johnson hasn't said he's going to run for re-election yet. Frankly, I don't know who would want that damn job myself. It's just like, they got all these huge budget problems, and everything that goes wrong you get blamed for. But you got at least 16 people who are interested. We'll see how many of those people, and there may be more. There could well be more. I mean, again, it's July. Brandon Johnson didn't get in the race till October, and if Brandon Johnson gets out of the race. Remember, Rahm Emanuel bowed out of the race, and that in 2019, and that causes, he got out of the 2019 race. I think it was late 2018, and that prompted a whole bunch of other people like Susana Mendoza to jump in the race. Like, we weren't going to run against Emanuel, but now he's dropped out, so we'll run. There may be some politicians out there who don't want to run against Brandon Johnson, and Cam Buckner might be one of them. They might be like, hey, all you're going to do is split the African American vote, and you're going to hurt Brandon Johnson, and maybe you just keep your powder dry. I don't know, but if Brandon Johnson decides he doesn't, he's had enough, then you could see a bunch more candidates jump in, because there's always, like Jamal Green and all these candidates who've run before, who, everyone wants to be mayor. So I think it's fascinating, and I'm glad you're keeping a list, and we can keep a joint list if you want somewhere. But I just think it's really interesting to see all these people. I've had email exchanges with Liam Stanton, whom is a very obscure name. He seems like a very bright guy. There was an interesting op-ed this morning from Joe Holberg in the Tribune talking about lead abatement, and he's claiming that we could solve our lead pipe problems by installing filters in everyone's homes rather than digging up the streets and sidewalks to put in new pipes. I don't know if that's true, but there are people who are out there making some noise, and I think most of these people here, a few exceptions, probably would be pretty good. Yeah. Might be good. I don't know, but and people said to me, like, well, who are you going to vote for mayor? I was like, I have no idea. I just don't know who. I haven't heard.
One of the things that we've talked about here at the station, and what I told other hosts can have their own ideas, but. If it's somebody like Alexi Janulis, if he enters the race, somebody who has a really high profile, a lot of name recognition, Susana Mendoza, Mike Quigley, those would be people that I would talk to about their race. But until it's closer, and some of the people like Lisa Nee or Liam Stanton, who you've never heard of, until it shakes out, Joel Holberg, just we see who can put together the money, who can put together the support, who stays in there. Like when it gets to be closer to the race, then I say, we'll talk to people. But I remember I used to have Paul Vallis on. He and I used to do a segment every week. And I talked to him privately when the rumors started to swirl. And he said to me, he said, you can't run for mayor unless you have at least $7 or $8 million. And he said, if somebody showed up in my office and said, here's $8 million, he said, I'd probably run. But he said, I don't have that kind of money. So unless somebody wants to support me to that, at least that extent, it's a no-go. And as it turned out, he did find that. But it is an expensive proposition. I asked Michael Dorff once, the Democratic lawyer, when people say they're going to run for president and then they drop out because they've suddenly decided they want to spend more time with their family, Michael laughed and he said, nobody, especially not at that level, nobody willingly drops out of a race. They drop out of a race because their money is gone. They see no more money coming in, and they know they just aren't good. Janet Mills, part of the reason why she did such a quiet campaign is she didn't get a lot of support. She didn't get a lot of money in Maine. And so his take was, look at the money. If you've got enough money, you stay in the race. If you don't have enough money, you drop out. So I guess I'm willing to see who's in the race when it gets much closer.
Well, we have to wait until the filing deadline, which is for petitions, which is in October, before we see how many candidates are actually in the race. And actually not even then. We have to wait until after the petition challenges are disposed of. And we could have 14 candidates in the race. It's possible. They can start passing petitions, I think, at the end of this month. And then they've got a few months to get 12,500 valid unique signatures. And so that's going to be the test. I mean, I would be right with you in saying, like, let's not, have an hour with Dr. Lisa Nee or an hour with some of these other people before they file their petition, show you that they're actually in it. Maine, I'm surprised, you're right about Janet Mills. Maine's population is about 1.4 million, which is, Chicago is like, twice that size anyway, right? Mm-hmm. Just the city of Chicago. So the amount of money that it would take to run for senator in Maine would be, I think, less than it would be to run for mayor of Chicago. So I'm surprised she couldn't, as a former governor, I'm surprised she wasn't able to raise the money. But you're absolutely right. And when you look at this field of candidates here and you see the ones who are already in elected office are likely to have fairly decent campaign war chests. Alexi's got a lot of money, mm-hmm. that. I don't know how much money Brandon Johnson has. I've read reports that he's not doing that well, but Susana Mendoza has money. Mike Quigley has money. Maria Pappas probably has money in her. Hang on a second, Eric.
I want to continue this discussion, but I just looked at the time and I am late for a break. Eric Zorn and I are going to talk more about people who may or may not be in the mayor's race when we come right back after this.
Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now.
A fair balance where the facts come out.
On WCPT 820.
Joining me is Eric Zorn, former Chicago Tribune columnist, who is now the founder of the newsletter, The Picayune Sentinel. In today's edition, he talks about the people who are and who may be running for mayor of Chicago. And as I told you, since I started my list in November, because unfortunately I didn't write down where exactly, I try to keep track. Was this the Daily Herald? Was this WGN? Was this in Politico? But I started this list November 19th because Maria Pappas, who you say has told you she's an unofficial candidate, Maria Pappas came out on November 19th and said she was running for mayor. There didn't seem to be anything unofficial about it because she was the first person I put on my list, and it was November 19th. Why do you think she's saying she's unofficial? Maybe the funding hasn't been showing up like she would like?
She's running for re-election as Cook County Treasurer this fall, and I think she does not want to be seen as running for two offices at the same time, which is I'm pretty sure why Alexi Janulius has not, the Secretary of State, Alexi Janulius has not announced either that he doesn't necessarily want to tell voters that he is he's running for one office, but he actually wants another one. Mike Quigley has announced that he's going to run for. I mean, he's running for re-election to the U.S. House, but he's also said he's running for mayor. And Laura Washington did a column of kind of decrying this practice of running for two offices at once, and she kind of focused on Quigley. I'm a big fan of Laura's, but I thought that focusing on Mike Quigley was the wrong tack, because Quigley at least is telling voters in the 5th congressional district that he's going to, as soon as he's reelected, which he almost certainly will be, he's going to turn around and start running for mayor. And the voters know this, and he's up front with them. And it's kind of like J.B. Pritzker running for re-election when everybody thinks he's going to run for president, or Alexi Janulius running for Secretary of State when everyone knows he's going to jump in. And Maria Pappas is kind of making a joke of it, but Maria is kind of a character. So her I think she's being flippant when she's saying she's an unofficial candidate. I don't think she's got an actual she's filed any paperwork or has started raising money for that, or has a campaign site or anything. But that's the issue, is that these the people want to say, well, I want to run for this office, and that's the office that I'm interested in, not some other office. Susana Mendoza was 8 years ago, was running for mayor and running for controller at the same time, and some people I think held that against her. I think that maybe that was the lesson, although I don't think that was her problem in that election. I think she was hampered a lot by her ties to Alderman Burke and Speaker Madigan at that time. So anyway, I think that's what we're talking about with Maria.
Yeah. I see that. Which tack do you think is the better tack? You say you think Susana Mendoza was actually hurt because she was running for two offices, and yet Mike Quigley obviously feels that he needs to be upfront about that. What's the better approach?
To my mind, the better approach is being upfront with the voters and saying, yeah, I'm running for re-election to this office, but I have my eye on a higher office. And if you don't like that, don't vote for me, in a sense. I mean, I don't think you have to say that as a candidate, but you're upfront about it. I think that's the way to go. I've known Mike Quigley for a long time, and I respect that he's being upfront about it. I understand why Alexi might be holding back and why Maria Pappas might be holding back. But I think that they are, or even Pritzker. If Pritzker were to say right now, "Hey, I'm running for president," people might say, "Well, hey, I thought you wanted to be governor." So I mean, that to me is to the extent that it's a political sin. I think it's a minor sin, but I think what the route that Quigley took and the route that Susana Mendoza took 8 years ago is the way to go. I think that's the honorable thing to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And as far as Pritzker, at least as far as I've been able to ascertain, it seems like the common wisdom is if you want to run for president, you don't really make that announcement till after the midterms because you want to keep everybody focused on the midterms, which seems reasonable to me, that, you don't want to confuse things or have people get sidetracked and make people think that maybe, you're stealing the thunder of what should be a focus on the midterms. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm going to wait and see what happens after the midterm elections. That's when I think the rubber's going to hit the road, if I may use a very, very old reference that probably no one understands.
Well, tires are still made of rubber, right? So No, I agree, and I think we do get ahead of ourselves because you and I are among the group of people, and probably a lot of the listeners here who are just sort of steeped in politics. I'm sure there are a lot of people in this country, a lot of people in this city, in this county, in this state, who haven't even really clued in to the fall election yet. They're just like they wait. The cliche is that people wait till Labor Day to go, okay, who's running for offices? And, so the idea that we're talking about the election in February of 2027 already strikes them would strike them as absurd. Like, get a grip. We're talking about people who probably won't even appear on the ballot. I was kind of frankly a little surprised at the very substantial play that the Tribune gave to Dr. Nee's announcement. I think you've been following these stories as well as I have, clearly. I don't remember somebody's an obscure person's mayoral announcement getting the kind of coverage that it got. I mean, a very large and well done story in the Tribune, page 3 the other day, top of page 3. I was like, "Whoa, really? This is quite something." They must think that she's got it going on.
Or
but I don't know.
Do you think it was just a slow news day? Because you and I both know that things that might not be front page news sometimes are when there's nothing else for the front page.
Yeah, well, it wasn't front page; it was page 3. But still, yeah, it might have been that. And frankly, it does seem like, I mean, given other things that get a lot of coverage, that somebody running for mayor and asking for us to consider the issues is a big story. It's like something that will generate interest, that we should give these candidates, especially once they're official, once they've got their petition signed and everything like that. Let's talk to them. I think it's fine. And yeah, maybe Liam Stanton isn't going to win, but let's hear his ideas. Let's hear that a smart person who has some smart ideas about how to fix some of the problems we have. Maybe he's not going to win. He's probably not going to win, but maybe his ideas can shape the race or shape the thinking of the alders. I don't know. I mean, it seems like part of the civic discourse. It's not such a bad thing.
Well, I think it depends a little bit on the media. For instance, I have this radio show, but I have a limited amount of time. And as when Lori Lightfoot was running, I interviewed Lori Lightfoot, but I remember there was also one day where I was talking to some 27-year-old who had like a computer business and wasn't even polling at 1%. And I remember sitting there thinking, is this the best use of the limited amount of time I have on the air? And I kind of decided it wasn't. So that's part of the reason why I want to see how things shape up before I take some of what is my very limited airtime to spend with somebody. Because the whole interview, I was thinking, why am I doing this? This man is clearly in the race so that he can promote his business, and I'm helping him do that.
Right. That is a good question. And I think it's one that the media does need to wrestle with. That these people who say, just for instance, we talked about Danielle Carter Walters, who's the co-founder of this pro-Trump group of women, a small group. The Trump support in Chicago is very small. So why would we give her a megaphone? Why would we give her a story in the paper just because she says she's running for mayor? She's got a website. Is that all you need to get interviewed by the media? Is that all you need to have credibility? I mean, I think we do need to see ourselves as a bit more of gatekeepers. I remember doing kind of the same thing back maybe 22 years ago in the Senate race that Barack Obama ultimately won. And I think I interviewed at great length every candidate on the ballot. And there were a bunch of them. If you remember, there was, I can't remember even who they were now. But there were a whole bunch of Democrats who were trying to run for that seat. Mm-hmm. And some Republicans as well, and I thought, well, I'll do a civic service, and I'll do columns on each of these candidates, and give them all, not what the print time, the equivalent of airtime. And at the end of the day, I thought that it was a waste of my time and a waste of my energy to go and interview. I mean, I went in person, interviewed all of them and transcribed the interviews. I posted the entire interviews online, and nobody read them. And it was just like, it was one of those things where I thought, you know, maybe it'd be better to focus on things that people really want to find out about rather than, just providing a platform for someone who is never going to win. So,
hey, Eric, you come from the world of newspapers. Now I know now it's different because if you're digital, it doesn't really matter if you have one story or 1,000 stories. But when it's the actual printed newspaper, is there, like, I have a limit. I can only do 3 hours a day. That's it. But when it's a printed newspaper, does the editor say, okay, we're cutting this off every day at 10 pages. So whatever we deem makes the 10 pages. Or is it like, oh, we got more news today, we'll do 12 pages. Does it vary?
No, well, no, it doesn't vary by the news in general. I mean, as I remember, like when Obama was elected president, I think they put a bunch more pages in the paper. But in general, what happens is that the pages come to the newspaper. They come to the editors. Like, okay, we've sold this many ads. This is the news hole that you've got to fill. And so then they fill the news hole with the stories, and it's done that way. It's not. We don't get to they don't get to work backwards like that. Say, well, we've got 30 good stories today, so give us 5 extra pages. It doesn't. The business doesn't work that way. It might have. 40 years ago when they were just minting money at newspapers with classified ads and movie ads and car ads and all those things that are kind of disappeared. The business is in real trouble in that regard. But no, the printed edition is set by the number of pages that the business side tells the editorial side that they get to fill.
Okay, thanks for that. I always wondered about that. Eric, we need to take another break. Eric Zorn of the Picayune Sentinel and I will be right back after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
It is Thursday. That means there's a new edition of the Picayune Sentinel. Eric Zorn is here to talk about it. You touch on one of the things that I've been talking about with people for the last couple of weeks, the seemingly out of nowhere, very sudden resignation of Chicago Chief of Police Larry Snelling. People who I've talked to say that, while that hasn't been, I was talking to Greg Hines from Crane's Chicago Business, and he said, well, he hasn't said anything publicly, but kind of the chat, the rumors are that he just was kind of tired of not seeing eye to eye with Mayor Brandon Johnson. And because, summertime is usually a time where you really kind of want a police presence. It is, if it's 10 degrees below zero, you're not going to have the same kind of crime that you're going to have if it's 80 degrees. And it struck many as very odd that in what is virtually the beginning or middle of the whole summer season, that he has just abruptly made this announcement. What do you think, Eric?
Well, the timing is very unfortunate for the city. I know that some police officers, if you look at like the Second City Cop blog, that some of them didn't like him, but I don't know that they've ever liked a superintendent. But I think most people and most police officers respected him and thought that he was doing a good job. We have had a reduction in crime, violent crime. I don't know how much of that is cyclical. There are all kinds of factors that play into reductions in crime, but they did a very good job during the Democratic convention. And he, like I said, people thought he was doing a good job. And for him to resign now, I mean, this is the high violence time of year, summertime. And to resign also at a time when it's going to be very hard to fill the job. There's no way that an esteemed superintendent from, say, another big city would come here without knowing that the mayor is going to be in place any longer for sure until next May, when we're going to inaugurate a new mayor. You could say, okay, I've got a great job in Minneapolis, let's say, and they're hired here, but then the new mayor comes in next May and says, yeah, I like to have my own police superintendent. So you're not going to be able to get the kind of quality that you'd want. And so it was just terrible timing. And you've got to see this. I think you've just got to see it as a bit of a middle finger, a quietly administered middle finger to Johnson. If you remember at one point, not too long ago, Johnson said that jails and incarceration and law enforcement is a sickness. Law enforcement is a sickness. Before he was a mayoral candidate, he was using the defund the police mantra, and he was actually using it on WCPT airwaves. And when challenged about it, he said, it's just somebody else's slogan, not mine. I didn't buy it. You know, he was in the defund the police area, and I get the idea of wanting to reform policing, but defund the police was a toxic statement, and I think it really put off a lot of the rank and file. And there's also the issue of ShotSpotter.
I was going to say, because the only public disagreement that I can recall between Snelling and Johnson was Snelling thought ShotSpotter should be kept on.
Yeah, well, and so did most of the alders in the wards where it was in place. So it was, and again, you know, I know there's a lot of debate about how effective ShotSpotter is, and then Johnson said, well, he's going to replace it with a similar gunfire detection technology, but that's been going on for it was September of 22, I think, that they got rid of ShotSpotter. Oh no, that can't be right. 24 that he got rid of ShotSpotter, and there's been no action on that at all. So I think there's just some frustration, the feeling that he doesn't truly respect police, and as you know, that's the only way I can read it. Otherwise, it just seemed like it's possible that he said, "Hey, summertime's a big time for violence. I don't want to deal with that.
That doesn't seem like Snelling.
That doesn't seem like him at all.
No.
So that would be the only other possible explanation. And so I have too much respect for Snelling to think that he's doing that. So I've got to see it as a bit of a dig at Johnson. I today in the Picayune Sentinel, I did publish what he told the Tribune in an interview last September, I think it was. He says, this is Snelling, and he says, one thing I can say about policing is it's the only job and only profession I can think of where people who have never done it, have no training around it, have no education around it, can come in and tell you how it should be done. Who's he talking to? What's he talking about there? Is he talking about the media, critics of the media? I don't think so. I think the media was fairly supportive of him. Is he talking about the alders? I don't think so. I think he's talking about Mayor Johnson there, and in retrospect, we probably should have made a bigger deal of it. I should have made a bigger deal of it. The Tribune should have made a bigger deal of it. You should have made a bigger deal of it. But it just kind of went right by me at the time. Yeah. But I think in retrospect, you look at that and think like he probably was frustrated working for Mayor Brandon Johnson, and he wants out. It's not going to help Johnson's political fortunes going forward. I don't know if it's going to hurt him that much. I remember thinking when Johnson got rid of Dr. Allison Arwady, the Chicago Board of Health commissioner, people really liked her. She's the one who was like the face of the city's anti-COVID thing, and people really liked her. They thought she was a really common sense, good doctor, and he just fired her because he and the CTU didn't like how she dealt with schools during the pandemic. And I thought, well, that's going to kill him. That's going to, but of course that was years ago and everyone's forgotten about it. But this, I don't think people are going to forget about. I think it's probably going to be an issue. If he runs for re-election, it's going to be an issue.
I think, well, do you think, because there is, I think the number 2 has been made interim chief. So you think nobody is going to want to take that job till after the 27 mayoral election? I mean, fear that they would take the job and then get shown the door?
Not nobody. Certainly not nobody. I'm sure there are a lot of people who would take it. The question is, they will conduct a national search, and they will want to find the best person. And it's going to be kind of like, looking for a coach. To use a sports analogy, if you're looking to hire a coach when the athletic director, it's not clear who the athletic director is going to be. You're going to a lot of people want to be your coach, but will the top coaches want to come to your institute, your school, your team? If you don't if they feel like it's not a solid situation. So I think it would hamper them getting the top talent that they'd want. I could be wrong, but I think that they could fill it. And my guess is what's going to happen is Fred Waller, who was the interim last time before Snelling, will probably just be the interim maybe for almost a year. So who knows? But again, I mean, you're absolutely right. And Greg Hines is right too. That there's something about this that really looks like like I said, a bit of a middle finger to Johnson on his way out the door.
You talked about how when Snelling made that comment, we all should have paid more attention. Recently, I saw something I was looking at a review from Capitol News of all the bills that had been signed here in Illinois. And I saw one that was signed that was something that I hadn't heard of that I think is really great. And I'm really curious. You and I need to see how this plays out. House Bill 4472 requires the Secretary of State to establish a statewide blue envelope program. It's a voluntary program. And if you're on the autism spectrum, you can show a blue envelope to police officers who may have pulled you over to let them know that you're someone who has a communication disorder. If they want, they can put their documents, their driver's license, whatever, in the blue envelope. But the very fact that they show a blue envelope to the officer already puts the officer on notice that this is somebody who may be impaired as far as communication. I didn't hear anything about that. I think that is a fabulous idea.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about it either. It's the first time hearing of it, and it does seem like something that would facilitate these sometimes fraught interactions between police and citizens when if a person is on the spectrum and it does not communicate as well as the police officer might expect someone who's not on the spectrum to communicate. To be able to have something to present to them. I mean, I don't know what a blue envelope, I guess that's probably a term of art. It might not be an actual envelope. Maybe
I assumed it was an actual blue envelope. I guess I have a more literal mind.
I mean, you could be right, but I mean, it seems like it could be a card that would be attached to or it could be that your driver's license itself is blue or something, that there would be some sort of form of identification that you would hand the police officer when he or she pulls you over, says, license and registration, you can hand them that without saying anything, and then they will realize that you have perhaps some communication difficulties, and they should not take offense if you don't know how to answer or if you freak out a little bit. They should be aware of that. I haven't heard anything about that until right now, but my first reaction is it seems excellent.
Yeah. Apparently, there are some police departments in Illinois who already have adopted the program, but the law to make it statewide goes into effect January 1st. And I think this is something I want to make sure goes into effect, and I'd love when there's some data on how it's working. Anyway, just a thought for a future Picayune Sentinel article.
Yeah,
I'm here
I'll
to
look
serve.
Into it. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. And, but we should look and see how it might have played out elsewhere. I mean, we may not be the first people to do this. So,
Eric Zorn, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Joan. We'll talk again sooner than last time.
I hope so. I think you've had all your vacation time. I'm going to allot to you for a while, so we'll see. Right. Today's is Thursday, which means the Picayune Sentinel comes out. You should take a peek at it. You should subscribe. We're going to take a break for news and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Juliet Jeske is very brave. She is, my daughter and I say, she is a big, brave girl. She spends time watching all of the right-wing conservative media that we don't want to have anything to do with, so she can tell us what's going on. It's called Decoding Fox News. It's a crowd-funded media project, and she is here to bring us up to speed on the latest things coming out of conservative media. Juliet, how are you doing?
It's been wild. These past few days have been crazy.
Let's start with the America 250th celebration. I saw a post on social media. It was about as long a clip about Fox News as I can tolerate. And it was these anchors, and behind them was this grass, and it was where the celebration was supposed to be, and it was absolutely empty. And one of the hosts had the nerve to look at the camera and say, well, you know, you can't really tell from this shot behind us, but there are thousands of people here. And I thought, man, buddy, you are a brave soul.
Yeah.
What did you think of the coverage?
It was wild. So on July 4th, I watched 6 hours of Fox News coverage.
I'm so sorry.
I broke it up. Yeah, I broke it up because it was just so like, what? And that was probably the biggest crowd they had for the Great American State Fair was on the actual holiday. And even then it was like, oh, this is still looking sad. This is still looking sad because just not enough people were there. And the craziest thing is that day, they had planned all these flyovers, military flyovers. Like, this will be great. We're going to have a military flyover, like, constantly, one right after the other. The problem is on television, those don't read because you can't see what's going on. So if you were there, you know, having these tight formations of planes flying overhead would be dynamic and exciting. But on television, it was like you just see a plane go zip, 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 on like the other side of the screen, and because they'd have like a split screen, and they'd be like, "Wow, it's a flyover." And I would sit there going, "Oh dear," because this went on for hours. What they were trying to say was really exciting, and you look over and you're like, you wouldn't even see, you just see air, and then like occasionally a plane would be in the shot, and I'm like, I know that there's a way to film these so it looks dynamic, but they don't know how to do it, and so it's just like, that was one of many fiascos during America 250 that was just so cringeworthy because they also had bad weather.
Yeah, well, that was one of the excuses given. Oh, you know, it was really hot. Yeah. And I've seen posts from a lot of local reporters who regularly cover state fairs in their states. And they're like, you know what? That doesn't hold water. I've been to the state fair when it's been like 98 degrees and you're still waiting in line for that, you know, fried whatever on a stick. There are still crowds everywhere and lines everywhere. People don't stay away from state fairs because it's hot.
Yeah, that was the other thing. It was like they were just using any excuse to try to cover for this. And yeah, even the Fox loyal wouldn't go down to D.C. for that thing. I mean, it was just people showed up on the actual holiday. And then when they would show shots of it, it was just people in super long lines waiting to get into like a pavilion or two, because a couple of the state pavilions were more popular. And I have to say, because shout out to my own, New York was very popular. I have no idea why. I never saw the inside. I tried to figure out what it looked like on the inside, and I still don't know. But apparently I'm in Brooklyn, had a very exciting pavilion. But it was just, the whole event was just because it rained. The actual stage show on July 4th was reduced to 2 singers. This tenor who, you know, sings very loudly. And I'm not a huge fan of his style. I think he kind of oversins, but he sings a lot. He sang like 3 songs, and then they had Lee Greenwood come out and sing God Bless the USA. And then Trump, that was the entire stage show on July 4th. And This was partly due to the weather, but nobody had a contingency plan. Nobody had a plan if it rained. It was just, that was the entire stage show. It was 3 people, and 2 of them were singers and 1 of them was Trump. And I was like, this is terrible, because they'd planned all these like bands, and we're going to have this, we're going to have that. And it was nothing. It was just, and it was pitch black by the time he went on. So when they showed it, you're like, I can't even tell what's going on. And then his speech was about flags. It was, flags and communism. And I just sat there going, what is going on? And then I just said this in my podcast. They had, they were trying to show like these historic flags. Like this flag flew over blah, 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 and this flag flew over, and they had them on stage. And then they had veterans from World War II come over and salute the flags. And I was like, I would like to know more about the veterans than the flags. Why are we talking about the flags so much? Like, who's that guy? Like, you sort of mentioned his name, but like, why don't you talk about the veterans? Because that's a human being that's far more interesting and compelling than this flag flew, and I'm like, oh. And then Trump's like, I won the 2020 election. Oh, he didn't actually say that, but he inferred it, and I'm like,
Yeah. I am
happy 50.
I'm sure Fox didn't show this, but there was some video from the Bulwark about all the people leaving, and you can hear Trump is still talking. He's still on stage. You can hear his voice, and somebody's just standing there holding their camera phone, and people are leaving by the dozens. There's a crowd, and there's just, they got their little chairs. They're heading home. And I thought that was pretty interesting, too.
Yeah, they were doing that. That was like the opening. He did an opening speech for the whole event. And then he also, that was like a few days ago, he did this opening event. And then that phenomena was happening during the 2024 election, like that, the run-up, the campaign. He, near the end, because he just does the same thing over and over again, and it's the same, like, list of grievances, and he just, typical speeches, an hour and a half. He, I've watched 60 of them. He had 117. I've gone through 60 of them. He, no kidding. No kidding. But that's how I make montages out of things he said. It's been very useful, even though it's painful to go through all that. But he would say these really long speeches, the same thing over and over again. And near the end of the campaign, there were several people who documented his fans just walking away. It's like they love the idea of Trump, but they don't actually like the reality. They're like, he's amazing. I'm bored.
Wow.
And they'll just leave. Sorry.
On a completely unrelated subject, as you probably know, and I've been watching on the interwebs, on the Googles, people are starting to post and read all of these social media posts that are jokes that riff off of the Scott Jennings, I spoke with Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes. And you're buried in jokes. And I shared one that was pretty tame, but I'm not going to share most of them. Is Fox News talking about Mitch McConnell at all?
Barely. He did come up, and it's sort of like, well, Mitch McConnell is in the hospital. Okay, next up. And it was just, it's a very minor thing because they don't know how to cover it. When Fox doesn't know how to cover something, they just ignore it. And with Mitch McConnell, I've seen a couple clips, but it's been very minor because they don't know how to handle Mitch McConnell in general because they loved him. Then he was, somewhat critical of Trump, and they've decided now they don't like him, but they don't know how to handle this because of his status in the Senate and how long he's been there and like what will happen if he does pass away. So they don't know how to handle it. They're just like, it's become a very, very blip. But they're like that about the war with Iran. When we start striking Iran the other night, again, kind of out of nowhere, conveniently after all these July 4th celebrations, which makes me think it wasn't that random. But, I think that Trump wanted to take a break so he could enjoy all this stuff. And they all kind of knew that this whole memorandum of understanding would collapse. They're just like, oh, yeah, we had a bunch of strikes in Iran. Okay, next up. And I'm like, wait, what? I mean, it was like a really minor thing. Now it's not because they can't ignore it anymore. But when we first kind of went back to, I guess they call it kinetic strikes, they decided to make that a very minor story. It was like barely mentioned. And they were like, here you go. Laura Ingraham was going on and on and on about the Smithsonian that same night. And I don't even know. I watched several minutes of it. And I said, I have no idea what she's mad about. Because they're like, the Smithsonian is left wing? What?
Yeah.
I'm like, you're telling me the museum is left wing? Oh, my God. Oh, my goodness.
The Smithsonian is run by a bunch of radical activists. Didn't you know that? We all know that. Everybody knows that.
I mean, because they were reading stuff, and I was like, I'm still confused at why are you upset? I mean, because I was like, the stuff they were showing, I'm like, have you been to a museum? They tend to be, they're not like, I'm very confused. And then the constant like communist, which has been for really the past couple weeks, and that's been bizarre. I call it the new Red Scare. They're just
I think that's, I don't know if I think that Donald Trump, is talking communists all the time because of Democratic Socialists getting elected.
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah. Donald Trump throws things out there and he sees whether or not he gets the reaction, whether or not it gets any traction. And if it doesn't, he moves along. And I don't think he's getting the traction. I don't think he's created the Red Scare that he wants to. What do you think?
We'll see what happens. They might keep going with this one for a minute because they haven't stopped. It's bizarre because when I first started posting clips about it, and I'm used to it because they always scream about communists on Fox. They're just taking it to another level right now. So I was clipping it and putting it on social media, and the comments were blowing me away because people were like, what are they talking about? Why are they talking about communists? Because to your average person, they don't think DSA communist at all, and nor do people in the DSA. I think I can safely say that democratic socialism is not communism, but not even close. And so, but Fox has got a Fox, so they just immediately turn it into tomorrow everything's they're going to take your house. I mean, I have a clip of Laura Ingraham saying that on Tuesday where she just goes, "They're going to come for your property." I'm like, no, they're not. This
oh
is
my
great.
God.
We have law after law after law for over 200 years. It's going to protect that private property. That's how this works. So until you come up with a new and complete system, they're not going to come for your property. So that was crazy. And I've made jokes about how do we go from an economy, the largest free market economy in the world, that is 70% based off consumer spending, into full-blown communism. I mean, we're not. It's absolutely absurd.
Juliet, there's so much more I want to talk to you about when it comes to Fox News. Juliet Jutsky writes Decoding Fox News. She's on YouTube with videos. She has a Substack. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
I'm talking with Juliet Jutsky, who does the Decoding Fox News project that you can find on YouTube and you can find on Substack. I'm very curious. There have been a lot of videos, Juliet, showing Trump, I believe this was when he was in Turkey for the NATO meeting, talking about how we're going to cut off all trade with Spain and how the Islamic Republic of Japan is firing missiles and how sitting next to him is President Putin. Do you want to ask President Putin a question? Only it was President Zelensky who was sitting next to him. How did Fox cover that?
Didn't even mention the gas. And they were like, I just watched these clips, actually. They said, look at how much everybody respects President Trump in Turkey. And they showed, your typical, opening, oh, there he is. They have him on the blue carpet. They mentioned the blue carpet and how he was, walking in from, the tarmac or something. And they showed him, on a runway and next to a plane, and he's coming off, and they're like, oh, look at that. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So they didn't mention the fact that he said Islamic Republic of Japan, or that he called Zelensky Putin. They no mention whatsoever. They're just like, he is a world leader. He is going to show NATO who's boss. And they just went on this whole crazy thing about NATO, and that was it. And I was like, wow. It's why people who watch Fox are so uninformed, because when Fox doesn't know how to cover something, they just skip it. They just don't mention it, or they leave out details, and they just rah. And it's why, if you sometimes we all have relatives, friends that watch Fox, and you'll say something and they go, that's not true. And you're like, yes, it is. And they're like, no, it's not. And you get into this crazy, and you can show them a clip and they still don't believe it. Which is one of the more frustrating things now is people call everything I do AI. They're like, well, that can't be real. That's AI. I'm like, it's real.
Yeah.
It's like this idea that people who are into Fox, because they get such a filtered, bizarro view of everything, where, Trump is perfectly fine and there's nothing wrong with him. Because, when he said the Islamic Republic of Japan, I just fell over. I was like, what? And
they fired a bunch of missiles, over 100 missiles. You got to watch those Japanese and their missiles.
Yeah, 111 missiles. And I just was like, I joked that it was a city-state in Florida, the Islamic Republic of Japan, that it was like a little, kind of like the villages. They're like, hey, here we are in Florida, the free state of Florida, as they would say on Fox. They always say the free state of Florida.
Good grief.
I'm like, it's just a state. It's okay, guys. Calm down. But yeah, it's been bizarre. They just ignore it. They just act.
I worked for many years as an anchor at the local level, and 2 or 3 times I went to New York and I filled in on the Today Show. And I know that writers, producers, executive producers, have a ton of stuff to do with content. You're getting ready to do an interview and a producer hands you a clipboard with information and potential questions to ask. So I understand about that. But I would never, ever say anything that I thought was untrue. I would never try to obfuscate. And frankly, even with what I got on the clipboard, there was no, like, you have to say this. It was just, here are some questions that you can ask that are pertinent to what this person wants to talk about, or here's some background on the book or whatever. So my question is, these hosts, anybody who does this job, that is denigrated by saying, well, they're just a talking head. Are they just talking heads? Megyn Kelly said something recently about, there was some controversy, and she said, if I was still on Fox, I'd be saying this, this, and this, but that's not true. So I'm going to tell you the truth. So is it that they just want the job and they want to be on TV and they want to be pretty, so they say what's ever put in front of them? Or do you think that they actually believe it?
It's like half and half. Some of them, I think, will say whatever is put in front of them, and some of them are true believers who are completely obsessed with Trump. And a great example was with the American 250 celebrations. And again, this is on July 4th, during the rain. Everything got delayed, and they were just trying to spin stuff on air. It was incredibly boring. They were hanging out in this bunker. They called it the Freedom Bunker, which was a double-wide trailer that had a bunch of the performers in it for most of the night, just talking to people, just trying to keep it exciting. And through a window, they could see Trump watching Fox. They could see Trump watching Fox on a giant television, and you could see, it was bizarre. So you could see the camera look through the window, seeing Trump standing next to Melania, watching a screen of the Fox News host at their desk, and then it would cut to an image of Trump watching himself as the camera was, that kind of crazy. And Harris Faulkner, who's one of the mid-morning hosts, she's like, look at him. He waved at us. Will he wave again? Oh, I hope he waves again. And then Brian Kilmeade got all excited, and they were trying to get Trump to wave, and it was like the reaction was insane. And I went, okay, true believers, like people who got that excited that he would wave at them. And she's like, hi, Mr. President. Hi, Mr. President. And I was like, oh, like that can't be faked. That's like cult member stuff. So there's some that are super into it. And then some people, I think Jesse Waters would read anything they put in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he cares. I think he's just like this. I'm making a lot of money.
I think he was desperate to get one of the prime anchor slots. And when he did, he wasn't going to mess it up any way, shape, or form. Juliet, can people go to, say, your YouTube channel and help fund your project?
Actually, the better way to do that is my Substack channel or or Patreon. And it's just I have Decoding Fox News at pretty much every platform. So you can, if you go to Substack or Patreon, that's the best way you can help fund my project. I'm also on YouTube. I'm also on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter. I'm also on Threads and Instagram. I don't do TikTok because they don't get, although I've been hearing people are stealing my content and sticking it on TikTok, which I find hilarious. But TikTok kept censoring me. So I was like, I can't take this anymore. They didn't really understand what I do. And they kept flagging everything. And I'm like, where nobody else does. So,
thank you so much for joining us. We need to stay in touch because I am not going to listen to Fox News, and I am so grateful that you do. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much.
We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with an interview with Aaron Kleinman right after this.
Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now.
A fair, balance where the facts come out.
On WCPT 820.
I'm very happy once again to be joined by the author of the Radio Free America newsletter that you can sign up for on heartlandsignal.com. Aaron Kleinman is here. He is a senior political reporter for us. First of all, Aaron, how you doing?
Getting as up to date as I possibly can on Maine election law, as one does in these circumstances.
Yeah. What I seem to be reading most about Graham Plattner's decision to bow out is the fact that he isn't really saying that anything he did had any weight in his decision, that it was kind of just, the party pushing him out, and boy, they better, think hard about it because the message he had was really important. And it seemed somebody on CNN this morning actually said his video seemed almost Trumpian in its victimization. What did you think?
Yeah, it was very immature. It was everyone's fault but his own. And, on the one hand, I'll be glad when he finally does file that paperwork to get out of this race, which, by the way, is due Monday at 5. It's currently Thursday afternoon, so he doesn't have a ton of, he has like over the weekend if he really wants to take it, but I would prefer it if he actually filed that paperwork already, because he did say that he's getting out of the race. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the important thing is getting him out of the race, getting a replacement on the ballot, because obviously this guy, should not represent the people of Maine and should not represent, Democratic primary voters who kind of, had the wool pulled over their eyes as part of that primary process.
Yeah. There is I'm reading a lot of different things on how this is going to happen, whether the Democratic Party of Maine is just going to name someone, whether or not Graham Plattner is going to have any input in that decision, or if there's going to be some kind of like mini primary within a primary. Do you have any idea how this is going to unfold?
Or, details are kind of trickling out. State law really leaves it up to the Maine Democratic Party on how they would choose the replacement, which would be due on July 27th, which is, a little more than 2 weeks from now. And just the logistics of setting up a primary run by the party within 2 weeks just make that basically impossible. So the ideas I've seen floated around are, basically people, doing like county level caucuses where they vote on delegates to go to a statewide convention where they vote on a nominee. I think the reason why Plattner hasn't filed his paperwork is that it seems like his people are trying to use whatever leverage they can to avoid having that process end up with a candidate that they don't want. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they have a lot of leeway here on one hand, like legally, but also, this is something where they do need to come up with a process where people feel bought in, because you are replacing a candidate that was nominated as part of a primary that gives them popular legitimacy, whether we agree with it or not. He has the popular legitimacy of winning a primary. And so he dropped out and kind of trying to come up with some type of copy of that popular legitimacy in such a compressed time frame. It's not an enviable thing. And it does seem like the Maine Democratic Party is doing what it can to kind of lend as much legitimacy to the eventual choice as possible. And, hopefully they come up with a process that leaves the minimal amount of people aggrieved.
Well, I saw a statement that they put on social media yesterday that was, seemed like they were really trying to thread a needle, because Graham hadn't officially dropped out, but it was like, hey, all you people who supported Graham Plattner, we really value you, and we want you to continue to be involved in the process and be an excited Maine voter. He hadn't even dropped out yet, and they were saying, look, if you supported Graham, please don't run away. We still want you, and we're still trying to make you happy.
Yeah, it is kind of a delicate, tightrope that they have to walk. It's not an enviable, position that they're in right now. Though I guess in some regard, they no longer hopefully have Graham Plattner as their nominee. So at least there's that. But yeah, obviously, we've talked about Graham Plattner before. I was never a fan of him, but I had to admit that he really did seem to inspire a lot of people. I have friends in Maine who say, yard signs aren't the only game. They're not always necessarily the most, representative sample of what people are thinking, but there are Graham Plattner yard signs everywhere. People really, what he was saying really resonated with people. The unfortunate thing that him as a person is just not someone who you can have representing you. So
yeah, I was really skeptical about him from even before this last crisis. But I listened to some of his speeches, some of his town halls, and I thought to myself, this guy may be problematic in some ways, but this is exactly the way Democrats should be talking to voters right now. He was like, I'm one of you. This is what's going on. This is what we've got to fix. It was, dare I use that overwrought word, authentic, but it wasn't somebody who seemed to have their head in the clouds. He wasn't going to issue a white paper or, an updated policy. He just talked to people like one of them, like met people where they were. And I think if Maine doesn't pick somebody who captures that same sort of feeling, they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. A really interesting thing is that he's actually like a private school kid. He went to Hotchkiss, which is one of the most elite private schools in the country. He comes from a relatively wealthy family. And so it's really interesting to me that, people love kind of rich people pretending to be poor, and this is a thing that goes back centuries.
Mm-hmm.
You have, back to Andrew Jackson, one of the richest slave owners in the South, campaigning for president and as kind of the champion of the common man. Teddy Roosevelt, born into, literally born in one of the richest blocks of Manhattan, running as this kind of, up and coming go-getter, kind of, populist champion. It's a very common thing where, Americans just seem to love kind of rich guys pretending that, even George, you and I remember George W. Bush,
Mm-hmm.
He's the son of a president. He's just clearing brush on the ranch. He's the guy you want to get a non-alcoholic beer with. We remember that. It's this thing that keeps coming up. And I mentioned that because there is someone who's running to replace Graham Plattner who is the real deal. His name is Troy Jackson. He represents a seat on the Canadian border, or he represented a seat on the Canadian border in the state Senate. He was the Senate president. He shepherded through a lot of, really great legislation around, expanding access to health care and paid family leave. But he's also, he grew up in a logging community. He worked as a logger. The highest level education he has, I think, is an associate's degree from the local community college. He got into politics through his labor union. And, and if you really go, this guy sounds really conservative. I mean, he was one of Bernie's first major backers in 2015. Now, I think the reason why he didn't catch on the way that Graham Plattner did is that, he's not as electric and a speaker as Graham Plattner. I think, one thing about, coming from kind of a wealthy background is that you end up having the polish to go out there and really kind of, be an electric stump speaker. Or, Troy Jackson, I mean, sometimes when people are confronted with authenticity, they're like, well, not that authentic. He's just kind of like
not the
he's a
dull,
normal guy.
boring kind of authenticity, the lively kind of authenticity, the charismatic authenticity.
Yeah, I mean, Graham Plattner, again, we don't like the guy, but he sounded like a pro wrestler cutting promos on the campaign trail. People were naturally just drawn to him. Troy Jackson, just a regular guy that you see in town. And, he is the real deal, but, maybe he's not like this electric speaker that Graham Plattner was, even though they probably have a lot of similar positions on the issues. They're kind of aligned with similar wings in the party. So we'll see. I mean, I think Troy Jackson could be, just the candidate to take on Susan Collins. But I think, I don't live in Maine. I don't vote in Maine. Ultimately, it's up to, my hope is that whatever this process does, it makes that the voters of Maine feel like they end up with a candidate that has some type of popular legitimacy. So as much as I like Troy Jackson, at the same time, I'm like, what I really care about is that the people's, voice feels like it's heard.
I'm sure you saw the same reports that I did. You know, as you mentioned, Graham Plattner hasn't filed the official paperwork to withdraw. And the story behind that seems to be that he wants a voice in who is going to be replacing him, which is kind of unusual. I mean, if somebody leaves a race because of illness or the traditional, we want to spend more time with the family, that's one thing. But he's leaving this race in disgrace. And those aren't usually people who get to weigh in on their replacement. Do you think that's going to happen?
The main party, which again is really the entity that's in control here, is pretty steadfast in saying, like, we are going to run the process the way that we want. You don't have leverage here. You need to get out of this race.
But he could be a spoiler. I mean, if he doesn't like who they choose, he does have a constituency. If he's out there saying, oh, Troy, he's no good, he's not this or that. I mean, we could look at a victory for Susan Collins.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I really don't see how he ends up just staying in regardless after everything he said. But it's more like me being like, hey, this is the world's most unreliable man, and I want to be sure he files the paperwork.
Yeah.
But, with everything he said, and even with kind of his maneuvering to because it does seem like he doesn't want to give Senator Jackson the kind of the stink of the stench of his, endorsement. So it seems like, who knows, maybe he's like kind of quietly doing it. Another candidate has said that she's actually the one that Jackson wants to run, that Plattner wants to run. But it seems like, he doesn't want the eventual nominee to be someone who again, it seems like all the candidates that have declared, except for maybe one, seem pretty aligned with him overall. So I don't know if it's like a turf thing or whatever, or if Jackson really is his preferred successor. It's all kind of speculation at this point. So it's kind of unclear to me what exactly he hopes to get out of this.
Mm-hmm. When do you think we'll get a feel for Maine's choice? I mean, there aren't that many weeks left till the primary. Surely they're not going to take 2 weeks to make this decision.
And I think that, again, details are dribbling out, but I think they're going to take as much time as they can just to get as many people involved as they can. Because again, the last thing you want to have as many people involved as possible in this decision-making process, because you're replacing someone who got, I don't know the exact figure, but I'm guessing hundreds of thousands of votes in a primary. And so it's impossible to get hundreds and thousands of people's opinions within 2 weeks in a reliable way. But you want to kind of open up the process as much as possible, and that unfortunately takes time. They would have a deadline of July 27th, and so that does give them a bit of track to kind of, again, hold some type of, county-level convenings where people are chosen to go to a convention where someone is chosen and the party puts forward them as the nominee before July 27th. So, it's, keep monitoring people on the ground in Maine. There's a journalist called Alex Seitzwald, who I follow for Maine News. He's kind of a former NBC News reporter, big city guy. He went back to his hometown in Maine being like, this will be a nice change of pace. And then Graham Plattner, he was supposed to be on vacation this week. The poor guy.
Yeah.
Follow Alex Seitzwald's monitoring of this race, if only because he had to cut his vacation short. Even though, Alex, you knew that July 13th was the dropout deadline for Graham Plattner, and you should have scheduled your vacation differently. But
yep, I hear you. Another thing I want to talk to you about is Rahm Emanuel, former mayor of Chicago, former chief of staff for President Barack Obama, made a big speech in Tel Aviv at Tel Aviv University yesterday. And, Politico got a preview of the speech, which I read through, and it seemed like a pretty bold speech to be making in Israel. And it was like, there's got to be a solution for Palestinians, and you can't be making settlements on the West Bank. And, you've got to be realistic about, creating some kind of a homeland for them. And, he thinks that, they're rich enough now. The United States doesn't have to keep buying buying munitions and giving them to him. It seemed a pretty bold speech to be giving in Israel. What did you think?
So I did not come into this presidential election cycle a fan of Rahm Emanuel. In fact, I wrote in March.
In Chicago, there are so many fans of Rahm Emanuel. She said,
I think the polls by the end of his term meant that I think about 13% of the people listening to this were fans of Rahm Emanuel by the time he was done as mayor. And, I'd even written that, when we're looking at the next presidential election cycle, we should look for someone who is not tied to the Biden administration at all, which he was a part of. And that, if we're going to sister soldier anyone, it should be Rahm Emanuel, because he's just this very unpopular guy who's part of an unpopular administration. And it's time to move on. It's time for a fresh page. But Rahm has surprised me a bit here because he seems to be trying to get ahead of issues in a way that other candidates that are running for president in this shadow primary aren't. And his speech in Tel Aviv was one where he actually showed a pretty good command of kind of, where do we go from here, and kind of the latest thinking on what our relationship with Israel should be. Because, and also he brings a lot of, he's Jewish. He, I forget the exact details, but he did some type of something with the IDF during the Gulf War. I forget what exactly. So, it's not like, he's been, a pro-Hamas activist, the way that they portray so many of the critics of Israel. Mm-hmm. And so, he brings some credit, and he said, and he was willing to kind of say, listen, in the United States, you were able for decades and decades to rely on kind of bipartisan support, because supporting Israel was kind of seen as a no downside thing.
Mm-hmm.
You were the only liberal democracy in the region. You were trying to be a good neighbor. You were trying to engage in a peace process. And when all those things were true, it was easy to get everyone to support you. But Israel over the last 30 years has adopted an increasingly go-it-alone approach to the region. And it really, I think, the real rupture, I think, came around the JCPOA under Obama, and where a lot of people in Democratic politics really felt betrayed by Israel, and how they, absolutely went, they pulled out every stop to try to stop that thing from becoming the law. And by the way, Joan, I remember when it was passed, some hawks saying, they're quoting like Winston Churchill after the Munich conference, like, you want peace, but you'll only get war. And now they're getting the war that they wanted. And guess what? It's a disaster. And the JCPOA was actually a brilliant piece of statesmanship. And, it's humiliating that we ever, tore it up, and look at us now. Mm-hmm. And so, Rahm he seems to understand that, and he seems to be willing to tell Israelis, you have blown through all that goodwill that you used to have. Yep. You don't get a blank check from America anymore. You need to start engaging seriously, not just with, the region-wide peace process, but also with getting Palestinians in the territories that you control civil and human rights.
Yeah.
And coming from someone who, again, has very close ties to the state of Israel, the hope was that kind of sends a shock to their system, because they have a big election coming up in October. And, if Israeli voters start realizing that, keeping on voting for this really kind of hard, because there's really no Israeli left anymore. There's an Israeli center and an Israeli far right. And if they keep voting for the far right, it's going to keep isolating them, and it's going to keep making things worse for them internationally. And they feel like that, there's kind of a feeling among a lot of the electorate there that, nothing bad will, they can kind of do what they want. Nothing bad will ever happen, no matter how extreme rightists they let into government. And I think Rahm's speech meant to be a message to them ahead of that election. Like, if you keep voting for these people, you're just going to isolate yourselves more and more.
Yeah. Two things about Rahm. First of all, we all know, we've all seen the elections where lightning can strike, and somebody who thought didn't have any chance at all suddenly is in the mix. I think that Rahm, for all of his speech about 2028, I think Rahm just wants to be in the room where it happens. I think he doesn't want to be relegated to the politics of the past. And I also think in the way he speaks to people, it's not dissimilar to the way Graham Plattner speaks. I mean, I think that there isn't somebody like Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, they're all talked about as potential presidential nominees. But Rahm Emanuel is speaking so clearly and confidently. And I don't see that from Pritzker or Newsom, frankly. And I think whether or not he makes a successful run, people who are interested in running should look at the way he speaks and the way he deals with difficult issues and the fact that he's not afraid to say something that might be unpopular. And too many politicians, I think, turn people off because they want to be so careful. You know, they don't want anybody to be mad. They don't want anybody to be alienated. So they end up saying a bunch of pablum. Rahm Emanuel does not speak pablum.
He doesn't. No, I think that's actually a really good counterpoint to like Gavin Newsom, because Gavin Newsom, it seems like everything he does is very reactive. You know, like we lose in 2024. He has Charlie Kirk on his podcast for some reason. You know, he goes to Davos, you know, not to like offer a positive vision of what liberal internationalism could look like, but to make fun of Donald Trump. You know, like everything he does is very reactive. He seems to be kind of, you know, in hockey, there's a saying, you want to skate to where the puck's going. You don't want to skate to where the puck is. Rahm seems like he's skating to where the puck is going. I don't think he's a very, like, you know, again, you kind of run into the Plattner thing where it's like, this isn't the guy you want representing you, but, you know, he does seem to have the right instincts here. Gavin Newsom seems to be sticking to where the puck was. And so, you know, I think Rahm, you're right. I mean, I think he's kind of setting an example for where he wants candidates to go, and I think this speech is part of that. And by the way, speaking of Plattner, Axios just came out with a story where he said he's going to drop out on Monday. I don't know, for sentimental reasons or to just give people heartburn over the weekend. This guy.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, yes, you're exactly right. He wants to make sure that the people who pushed him out are taking Pepsid every other hour.
There's a word I want to put between this and guy that we can't say on the radio. I just want everyone to know that.
And as we wrap up, something else we can't say on the radio but I think is reflective of the way people are looking at Republicans these days. There have been so many jokes on social media about people who talked to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes and then they say something absolutely absurd. I talked to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes and he said, don't take Skyrizi if you're allergic to Skyrizi. I mean, that's one of the cleaner ones that has been going around. But, I mean, Scott Jennings, does anybody believe that this guy talked to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes about everything in the news? And yet, we're not seeing any videos. We're not seeing any statements from his staff. His wife isn't even in the country, for God's sake. And if it turns out that Scott Jennings was perhaps lying to us, I think he's going to say, well, you know, I felt like I needed to protect him. You know, everybody was, he's not going to say, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. He's going to defend the lies that he's telling. If indeed it turns out that Mitch McConnell did not speak to him for 20 minutes. Anyway.
Well, you know, we're just coming off this thing where Tom Keene from New Jersey was unavailable for 3 months because he was getting treatment for, you know, now he says now it was for depression. And again, you know, you have Mitch McConnell, who, again, is similarly becoming about as easy to photograph as the Bigfoot or Sasquatch, as he is known. And... Yeah, and like, you know, say what you will about Joe Biden in 2024, but like he still like was in public. You could still see him. And so it's just, you know, it seems like Republicans are just becoming increasingly almost like paranoid about this stuff. And, you know, like I get that it can be hard to like, you know, engage in a succession. And, you know, votes are, you know, I mean, hey, we just spent 20 minutes talking about when is Graham Plattner going to file his paperwork already. But, you know, at some point, like you need to kind of like be at least a little transparent with people about what's actually going on. People hate being left in the dark like this. So, yeah, You know, I talked to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes too. He said he was really sorry about the whole Merrick Garland thing. He wishes he could have it back, you know. And actually, he said that we're kicking Gorsuch off the court. We're kicking Barrett off the court. He said, you know, we're going to put two liberals on it.
My favorite one was the post by Thomas Massey, which a lot of people at first took seriously. But he said, like Mitch McConnell said, that he's really sorry that I lost my primary and all this. Yeah. Aaron, it is always fun to talk with you. Heartlandsignal.com and sign up for Radio Free America, Aaron's weekly newsletter. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Joan. Good luck, everyone waiting on Graham Plattner.
We'll be right back after this. Okay, we are back. We're not going to take that break because we are short on time. So I just want to let you know that I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez is up next. She is going to talk to psychologist and author Dr. Susanna Flores. Tomorrow, Richard Chu is going to be talking to the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Ghazala Hashmi. And he's also going to interview Amy McDonald, host of the Foolish Optimist with Amy McDonald podcast. Again, I will see you back here at 2 o'clock. We are going to be talking with Ray Suarez. We haven't talked to him since he wrote that book, but he is still weighing in on the news, and he will weigh in on the news with us tomorrow. So have a great evening, my friends, and good night.